Alright, this is Mr. Gillum, and today we're going to learn a little bit about coordinate planes. So we're going to talk about quadrants as well as how to graph a point, and one that's vertical. And we've learned in the past that horizontal number lines get bigger from left to right, and vertical number lines get bigger from bottom to top. Alright, now coordinate planes are used to describe a position. And so there are two number lines, and they each have a name. One is the x-axis. It's the horizontal one, and one is the y-axis, the vertical axis. And we don't call them number lines, we call them axis, or axes if it's plural. And Mr. Gillum's whiteboard is moving real slow today, a little delayed, so please be patient. So you probably have talked about this before in the past. On the x and y axis, there are numbers, and the numbers get bigger to the right on the x-axis and bigger as you're going up on the y-axis. And it's hard to read these numbers, but 0 is right in the middle. Right there in the middle is 0, 0. Sometimes we call that the origin. The origin. It's 0, 0, and you probably have heard that before. The ordered pairs are written in a set x comma y. The x number represents how far left and right you're moving, and the y number represents how far up and down you're moving. They're in alphabetical order always, so if you can remember that the x-axis is sideways and the y-axis is up and down, you should have a good idea of where to go with your point. Okay, so always left and right first, up and down second. It's kind of like a multiplication chart. In fact, I'm going to do a little example here. If I had the point 3, 4. It's in the form xy, so I'm going to go to the point 3 on the x-axis and the point 4 on the y-axis, and it's positive 4, so it's up and down. And like a multiplication chart, I'm just going to follow where they would intersect. So I know the point 3, 4 would be located right here, that green dot. All right, and it works the same way with negative numbers as well. So if I had, say, -3, -4, and it's always in the form x and then y, I would take a look and I would move to the position of -3 on the x-axis, which is that guy, and -4 on the y-axis, which is that guy. And like a multiplication chart, just find where they would meet. And in this case, they would meet right here. So the position, -3, -4, would be that point. And again, I know this is review for some of us, so let's move on to something that maybe you haven't heard about before, and those are called quadrants. Now, they call them quadrants. The word means quad, sorry, the prefix quad means 4, and so they're not maybe in the order that you would think they are. The first quadrant is actually in the top right-hand corner, and these are Roman numerals. So there's quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. They go counterclockwise. All right, and there's special relationship between the numbers in each quadrant. In the first quadrant, you can see on your number line here, on each number line, that only positive numbers are to the right and only positive numbers are up and down. So the coordinates of anything in the first quadrant would be 2 positive numbers. When you look at the second quadrant, this time these are negative numbers. The x values are negative numbers, and the y values are positive numbers. So the x values are negative, and the y values are positive. In the third quadrant, left negative and down negative. So anything in the third quadrant will have 2 negative coordinates. And finally, anything in the fourth quadrant is positive on the x-axis, left and right, and negative on the y-axis. So anything in the fourth quadrant will have a positive value and then a negative value. If a number's on one of the axes, the x-axis or the y-axis, meaning that one of the coordinates is 0, then it's not considered to be in a quadrant. Okay, it's not considered to be in any quadrant. So only positive positives will be in quadrant 1, negative positive in 2, negative negative, and positive negative, and in counterclockwise order. Let's do an example here, and this is just a real quick one, and I think you guys are going to like this because it's not too challenging. It says determine the coordinate for each figure. So the star. So I'm going to look for the star here. And I see the star is this guy right here. And I know my quadrants, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I see that the star is in the first quadrant. So I would say, quadrant 1. Oh, it actually doesn't ask me what quadrant it is. It says what the coordinates are. It is in quadrant 1. Let's count together. So I'm looking for an ordered pair with my x value first and my y value second. So when I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on my x-axis, it is at the coordinate positive 5. On the y-axis, 1, 2, 3, only 3. But this is a positive 3. This is the y-axis. So as you can see, 5, 3 would be my coordinate for the star. When I look at the lightning bolt, it's this guy, also in the first quadrant. So in this case, our x-coordinate, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is positive 5. Okay, we're thinking how far on the x-axis it goes. And then how far on the y-axis it's at. Its position on the y-axis. 1, 2, 3, 4 this time. So at a positive 4. All right, so that would be the coordinates of the lightning bolt, 5, 4. Also in the first quadrant. Now they're just asking me what quadrant each of these points is in. So I can visualize and I can estimate, or I can use my reference here on my notes, depending on the values of the x and y numbers. So let's take a look here. Negative 4, 8. If I were to look at the x-axis first and move in the negative 4 position, I would be right here-ish. And if I were to move positive 8 in the y direction, I would be up here. So where those would intersect would be somewhere in quadrant 2. Let's take a look at negative 4, negative 8. Again, the x position is negative 4, in this case over here. And the y position is negative 8, somewhere down here. Those positions would intersect somewhere in quadrant 3. Okay, for negative 8. The 4 position is to the right on the x-axis, this is the x value, and now the y value is negative 8, so somewhere down here. Their positions will be somewhere in the quadrant 4. And finally, 4, 8. So 4 in the positive x direction, 8 in the positive y direction, they would intersect somewhere in quadrant 1. Finally, if I were starting at 0, 0, and I were going 3 units right, so in the positive x direction, 1, 2, 3, and 8 units up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, in the positive y direction, what quadrant would I be? I would be in quadrant 1. And it also asked me what coordinates would I end up at. Well, if I'm moving to the right, this is the positive x-axis. And if I'm moving up, that's the positive y-axis. So I would be at positive 3, positive 8. All right? So those are some examples of what you might see on your homework. Hopefully you know which quadrants it goes in, 1, 2, 3, 4, in counterclockwise position, as well as how to label coordinates and that they are in the order of x and then y. That's it for today.